If it bleeds, we can kill it, Captain Reynolds muttered, wiping alien gore off his combat knife. But whatever that was, it didn't even have blood. The Vanguard were supposed to be the end of us. According to every known interstellar record, they were the undisputed apex predators of the Orion Arm. Over 2,000 species had encountered them, and none had escaped a second meeting. They didn't just hunt. They removed systematically with surgical precision and an unsettling sense of sport. Their arrival wasn't marked by planetary bombardment or posturing. They just appeared, sleek, scaled, and grinning. Every muscle coiled, every movement silent. Their skin shimmered with built-in stealth fibers. Their claws could pierce reinforced carbon silicate armor, and their vision ranged from thermal to ultraviolet in seamless fluidity. Apex hunters, top of the food chain in every biome they infiltrated. Then they met humans, and everything went wrong. IT started on Outpost Fiji 9, a minor mining colony with no real defenses. 100 workers and a 10-person security team who spent most of their time breaking up brawls over coffee rations. It should have been a slaughter. And for the first few minutes, it was the Vanguard came in through the ventilation shafts. Classic move. Quick, clean, and brutal. 2 miners were torn in half before anyone even raised an alarm. The emergency broadcast barely made it off planet before turning to static. But 10 minutes later, some idiot, sent back a reply. That someone was Captain Reynolds. We'd later find out he wasn't even supposed to be there. He had rerouted his patrol frigate to deliver a crate of confiscated bourbon he'd promised a friend on Fiji 9. That's the kind of man he was. The kind who traded alcohol for favors and took his dog buddy on off-world raids because he's got a better nose than half of you. The Vanguard had never met anyone like him, or anyone like us. He landed without authorization, marched straight into the chaos with a cigar in his mouth and Buddy at his side. The footage recovered later shows him humming an ancient Earth tune, something loud and off-key about riding into danger. He didn't flank, didn't hide. He walked right down the central corridor, boots clanging on the metal floor like dinner bells. Point 2 Vanguard dropped from the ceiling, hissing. Buddy growled. Reynolds laughed. Then he threw the cigar. The thing wasn't even lit, just soggy and chewed to bits. But it bounced off the first Vanguard's snout. And in that half-second of confusion, Reynolds opened fire. Twin pistols, old Terra models, too loud, too flashy, and wildly inefficient. He fired 17 rounds before the first one hit the ground. When the second lunged, Buddy leapt. There is apparently no recorded instance of a Vanguard predator being bested in direct melee by a non-sentient life form. That stat ended on Fiji 9 when a 3-legged golden retriever latched onto one's throat and refused to let go. When the smoke cleared, Reynolds spat, reloaded, and said to the trembling survivors, "Next time, scream louder." The Vanguard withdrew from Fiji 9 within the hour. That should have been impossible. They never withdrew. They exterminated. But on that day, for the first time in galactic memory, they panicked. And it wasn't the last time. Word spread fast. Not through official channels. Those were still frozen in diplomatic paralysis, but through whispers, intercepted signals, and scattered fragments of panicked Vanguard chatter. A pattern emerged. Every time they encountered humans, the outcome turned bizarre. One report said they ambushed a squad in the jungles of Pandora Prime only to find the humans waiting, faces smeared in mud, blending into the environment better than the Vanguard. Another described a team using spoons, as decoys while they flanked a predator group with machetes and bear traps. But the worst, the most terrifying, was the Hyperion Gulf incident. 30 elite Vanguard hunters boarded a Terran freighter suspected of smuggling weapons. The humans inside didn't resist. They didn't even seem alarmed. Instead, they smiled, offered drinks, and invited the hunters to a game night. The Vanguard accepted. They had no cultural equivalent of games. To them, all interaction was survival or domination. They mistook the gesture for surrender. 3 hours later, 6 hunters had fled into the void of space voluntarily. The survivors couldn't speak coherently, but what intelligence we could salvage included phrases like black and white tiles, the clown with exploding cards, and they kept laughing as we lost. We traced it back later. The humans had introduced them to something called Uno. By the time formal galactic powers tried to respond, the Vanguard had pulled out of 7 sectors. They no longer engaged with human colonies. Their warships avoided Terran patrol routes. The apex hunters of the galaxy had stopped hunting us entirely. The IT wasn't that they couldn't kill us. Physically, they could. They were stronger, faster, more agile. But we were chaotic. We didn't follow patterns. We didn't react the way they predicted. And worst of all, we enjoyed it. One Vanguard defector later said in a cracked voice translator, "You people don't fear pain. You collect it. You weaponize discomfort. You fight for fun." He wasn't wrong. Back on Earth, there's a quote from an old soldier named Patton. We keep it engraved in every Terran military base. The Vanguard eventually saw it too, translated in their panic logs, burned into the memory banks of ships they abandoned mid-dash flight. IT says, Americans love a winner and will not tolerate a loser. But they always miss the second half. Americans play to win all the time. I wouldn't give a hoot in hell for a man who lost and laughed. Humans laugh as we win. That's what broke them. Reynolds? He's still out there, still with Buddy. Last seen dropping onto an uncharted moon with a smile on his face and a baseball bat in hand. He named it Fetch. The Vanguard Highness convened in silence. That alone was a signal of their distress. Normally, the Apex Council, 12 warriors chosen by trial through blood, communicated in guttural bursts, growls, and pheromone-laced clicks. But now, only the occasional twitch of a tail or clench of a mandible marked the tension. The footage from Fiji 9 was playing again. For the 7th time, Reynolds, dragging a dismembered Vanguard corpse by the tail, paused to light a match against his armor. The spark illuminated his face for a split second, grinning, cracked-lipped calm. The match went into the mouth of the fallen predator. Reynolds said something about sending a message. Then the feed CUT.IT wasn't the brutality that concerned the council. It was the attitude, the lack of reverence for fear, the way this human strutted through battle as though it were a mildly inconvenient chore, something between fixing a toilet and walking a hyperactive canine. The Vanguard were not used to that. An envoy had been dispatched weeks earlier, hoping to open a line of understanding with Terran Command. It hadn't gone well. The lead Vanguard approached with formal dominance posture, shoulders raised, claws splayed, mandibles slightly open to show restraint. The human ambassador, a former combat engineer named Stark, responded by offering a box. Inside? Jerky. Stark had smiled and said, "It's beef, dried meat. Best way to make peace is through stomachs, yeah?" The Vanguard diplomat, confused by the gesture, leaned in to inspect it. Stark seized the moment to slap the creature's back and then stuffed a strip in his own mouth and walked away whistling. The encounter caused a diplomatic seizure in the Vanguard hierarchy. There were no recorded responses for gift meat, followed by physical contact and a cheerful departure. The database flagged it as unquantifiable behavior. But that wasn't the turning point. The turning point came at Atlantis Station. Atlantis was a neutral trading hub, independent, lawless. The kind of place where smugglers, merchants, mercs, and bounty hunters rubbed elbows without much friction. Violence was expected but regulated. No dismemberments before dinner. No plasma weapons indoors. When a Vanguard pack arrived to track a rogue assassin and spotted 3 humans playing darts in the corner bar, they ignored them. Predators don't fear herbivores at the watering hole. They go about their business. That was mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 was trying to arrest the assassin mid-game. One of the darts hit a Vanguard lieutenant in the snout by accident. The human, unarmed and tipsy, blinked. "Oh hey, I got a bull's." The Vanguard bared fangs. A third dart lodged in his arm. The humans didn't apologize. They laughed. One of them shouted, "Double kill," and reached for another drink. The Vanguard attacked. The bar exploded into chaos. Tables flipped. Bottles shattered. The humans didn't draw weapons. They used weapons. One cracked a bottle over a Vanguard's head, then jammed the jagged neck into the leg joint. Another tore a bar stool leg free and swung it like a club. The third threw darts with surgical precision. Blinding 2 security cams caught the entire scene. The most damning part came 43 seconds in when one of the humans grabbed a bottle of hot sauce, screamed, "Say hello to pain," and flung it into a Vanguard's eyes. The fight lasted 92 seconds. The humans didn't even run. They sat back down, ordered another round, and argued about whether the dart scores still counted. The Vanguard response was immediate. tactical withdrawal from all open-access trade hubs where human presence exceeded a 4-to-1 ratio. They called it a strategic repositioning to preserve biointegrity. No one bought it. Reynolds, when briefed, reportedly asked, "So, we scared him out of a bar brawl. What were they expecting? Formal duels and tea." General Morgan, the Vanguard operations commander, could no longer deny the pattern. The humans were unpredictable, not because of superior weapons or numbers, but because they treated danger as entertainment. They didn't fear harm. They anticipated it, sometimes with snacks. Morgan called for a classified operation, one last attempt to reclaim Vanguard dominance by infiltrating Earth itself. No flashy raids, no show of power, just observation, covert research. Understand the psychology behind the species before they spread further. The mission was codenamed Project Silver Fawn. 5 elite hunters were dispatched. Stealth armor, no contact protocols, deep insertion. They lasted 3 days. Point 1 was hospitalized after breaking into a place called Gym, mistaking it for a weapons training facility. He challenged a bald human to a strength duel and was crushed under a weighted bar while the human shouted, "One more rep, baby!" Another wandered into a paintball arena, believing it to be military simulation. He was hit 46 times by teenagers in animal costumes wielding neon guns that a third mistook a kindergarten for a hatchery. He was captured, tickled by 22 children, and screamed so loud that the operatives monitoring his suit audio panicked and triggered emergency retrieval. The final 2, veterans of over 100 hunts, entered a sporting event where humans smashed into each other over a leather ball. They recorded 90 minutes of what was believed to be a war ritual. By the end, both had abandoned their mission logs and joined the crowd, chanting, "Defense! Defense!" When Morgan reviewed the data, he destroyed his personal console and resigned within the hour. From that point on, the Vanguard didn't just avoid humans. They feared them. Because you can't predict a species that wears injury like a trophy, makes war into a game, and greets death with a laugh. The Orion Collective didn't believe the Vanguard reports. At first, they thought it was a cover-up, a deflection, a humiliation too great to admit plainly. Apex hunters retreating from primates with rusted ships and unpredictable behavior? It had to be false, or at least exaggerated. The Collective commissioned a formal behavioral assessment. Not war, not a trap, just observation. They picked the planet Mars 3, remote, neutral, freshly terraformed, and rich in mineral resources. They seeded it with 20 human volunteers, all male, all former military, paid well to relax, patrol the surface, and not ask questions. The Orion surrounded the planet with cloak surveillance drones. They even brought in xenopsychologists and culture analysts. They were determined to study the strange predator-turned-sentient up close. The first week went quietly. The humans built shelters, hunted the local fauna, and argued over how to split rations. A few of them made primitive ball games out of rocks and sticks. One crafted a slingshot and declared war on a squirrel-like species that had stolen his protein bar. All of it was noted, annotated, analyzed. Socially competitive, one observer noted. Displays ritual conflict and territorial boundaries. Then came day 8. It rained. Acidic storm bands swept across the planet, dissolving most of the temporary shelters. The analysts expected panic, disarray, primitive evacuation behavior. Instead, the humans laughed. Point 1 ran shirtless through the rain, shouting, "Finally, a proper shower." Another yelled, "If I melt, tell my ex-wife she still owes me $20. 3 built a makeshift sled and began surfing mudslides down a ravine. The data coming in became more confusing by the minute. Their structures were gone, their equipment half-fried, and 2 of them were using laser rifles as cooking skewers. But morale hadn't dropped. If anything, it increased. Point 1 Orion analysts submitted a confused note. They converted versity into bonding rituals. One appears to be reciting poetry, while another simulates combat with his reflection. But things truly spiraled on day 11. That's when the drones picked up movement beyond the perimeter. A native predator, large, insectoid, armored, and incredibly fast, made contact with the human outpost. 12 feet tall, saliva dripping, triple-jointed limbs. It tore through trees like paper. It had shredded 3 other research species in earlier trials. Perfect apex testing scenario. IT burst into the clearing where the humans had set up their new camp around a bonfire of broken drone parts. The thing screeched. The humans looked up, and O1 ran. No one screamed. Point one of them, a stocky man named Downey, stood up and said, "You boys see that thing's legs? Tell me that wouldn't make a great barbecue rack." The creature lunged. They didn't shoot it. Not first. They tackled it. Three leapt onto its back, while another tried to blind it with a pot lid. Downey drove a sharpened tent pole into one of its joints while shouting something about Saturday night wrestling rules. It flailed, hissed, and swung them off. But by then, the rest had circled it, tossing ropes, chairs, and in one case, a boot filled with fire ants. After 8 minutes of chaos, the creature limped away, confused and bleeding. The humans cheered. Then they went back to the fire and started arguing over who had the better form tackling the thorax. The Orion pulled all observers within 12 hours. Not because of casualties, there were none. Not because of failure, every system worked. But because the data was unusable. None of it matched the models. Subject species responds to existential threats with amusement. The report read, displays of aggression increase group cohesion rather than trigger survival retreat. One analyst, in a rare unsanctioned comment, wrote, I believe we are witnessing a culture built not on triumph over danger, but companionship through it. They don't just survive fear. They mock it together. The Orion shut the project down. But someone else didn't. Far outside the reach of law, there were still those who saw potential. Not for research, not for diplomacy, but for sport. A mercenary syndicate known as the Black Ring offered a prize. Any hunter who could subdue a human in solo combat would receive 500,000 credits and a fleet-grade stealth cruiser. 300 applicants entered. 9 returned, and every one of them said the same thing. It wasn't the weapons. It wasn't the strength. It was the way they fought like they were already bored. One hunter reported that after stabbing a human in the leg, his opponent looked down, blinked, and said, you're going to need to try harder. Another had snuck into a human's sleeping quarters at night. The human woke up mid-ambush and started telling jokes. One of them was about a duck walking into a bar. By the time the punchline landed, the hunter had forgotten his blade and was tackled into a sink. One returned half-naked, carrying a can of whipped cream and muttering about fridge traps. He refused to explain further. At that point, the Black Ring canceled the bounty. It was no longer about the prize. It had become a question of reputation. And in the void between stars, fear spreads faster than light. They tried to erase the records. The Vanguard, the Orion, even the Black Ring. All of them. Whole networks of data purged. Witnesses silenced. Ships scrubbed of telemetry logs. If a story about humans could not be understood, then it had to be buried. But stories don't die easy when they come with bruises, laughter, and broken bones. The final event, the one the rest of the galaxy still pretends didn't happen, took place on Olympus Station, a floating trade port straddling the edges of 3 major hyperlanes. Neutral ground, 47 species, 8,000 inhabitants, and 1 human. Technically 2, if you count the dog. Reynolds wasn't supposed to be there. Again, by that point, he was unofficially banned from every civilized quadrant for cultural contamination, but someone needed a courier, and someone else owed him bourbon. So he docked, but he disembarked first, tail wagging, head held high. The docking crew recoiled. Is that a predator? An engineer hissed. He's a retriever, Reynolds replied. He only hunts tennis balls and approval. He was halfway through customs when the alarm started blaring. Unmarked vessels, heavy weapons signatures, breach pods. The Vanguard had returned. Not for conquest, not for cleanup. This was a message, a last desperate lunge to reclaim fear from the one place it had slipped through their claws. They launched 50 strike troops into Olympus's lower decks. Civilian decks, not strategic zones, just people. They didn't expect resistance. They got Reynolds and 6 janitors and 1 retired human cook with a titanium knee and a cast iron frying pan. They barricaded the entrance to Quarter 6 using supply crates, vending machines, and a broken hover cart. The Vanguard sent in scouts. The humans sent back a crate of soda cans, each with a sticky note, return to sender. Shaken, not stirred. The first wave was repelled using fire extinguishers, chair legs, and according to eyewitnesses, a surprisingly lethal mop. The second wave paused at the corridor entrance. Surveillance footage showed Buddy sitting in the middle of the hallway, tongue out, tail wagging. The dog had a bandolier of sausages across his back like ammunition. The vanguard didn't understand the message. Then Reynolds stepped into view, holding a radio. "You're not fighting an army," he said. "You're fighting a bunch of guys who haven't had a decent drink in weeks and think this is the most exciting Tuesday they've had in a decade." The vanguard charged. They didn't reach the barricade because what humans lacked in bioweapons or advanced tactics, they made up for in sheer absurdity. The station's waste vents had been rerouted, cleaning drones reprogrammed. An entire storage room had been flooded with lube from a shipment error 3 months prior, something Reynolds used to coat the floor behind the first fallback line. The result was carnage. Sliding, flailing carnage. One Vanguard analyst later described it as slipping into a nightmare made of grease and improvised percussion. The corridor echoed with whoops, laughter, and the unmistakable sound of someone beating a predator over the head with a microwave. When the vanguard retreated for the third time, Reynolds didn't pursue. He sent them a snack tray. Peace offering? Maybe. Mockery? Definitely. The tray was found later by a cleanup crew. It had slices of cheese, dried fruit, and a handwritten note. "Next time, bring board games." The aftermath was recorded in quiet files in silent council chambers. The Vanguard Highness voted to terminate all future engagements with humans. Not out of weakness, they claimed, but because humans pollute the battlefield with unpredictability. Other species followed. Not out of cowardice, out of sense. You don't challenge a species that laughs at danger, taunts fear, and sends gift baskets after bar fights. Humans were never the strongest. Not the fastest, not the most evolved. But they were the first species to weaponize joy. And that changed everything. Buddy got a medal. Reynolds refused one. "Give it to the mob," he said. "It had a harder day than I did." The footage from Olympus Station leaked anyway. Pieces made it into underground feeds and back-channel networks. The final frame, the one that kept being replayed in dark corners of the galaxy, was of Reynolds standing beside Buddy, both backlit by the smoking wreckage of the quarter. He held up a soda, can in toast, and winked.